Hello and welcome to PPMA TV with me, Andy Fitzsimons. Delighted to be joined today with Joanna Yarrow from IKEA. Joanna's just finished her keynote speech on sustainability and the mission to make it the new norm. Can you elaborate on that a bit for us, Joanna, for perhaps the people who didn't see your presentation today?
Yeah, it's what I do in my role at IKEA, but I guess it's what I've been doing my whole professional life really, is looking at how can we take sustainability from being, if you like, a niche, scientific, quite difficult to understand concept to actually look at how can we make it just a part of everyday life, and how can we use sustainability as a way of actually making quality of life better for everybody at the same time.
Absolutely, and IKEA are on their own drive themselves, aren't they? Is it by 2030 they're looking to bring about 100% renewable energy?
That's right.
What about them?
Well, at IKEA we've got lots of big goals for 2030. We want to inspire and enable more than 1 billion people to live a better life within the limits of the planet. So we're starting with our own operations, and as you say, one of the things that we've been focusing on as part of our drive to become a climate positive business is to become self-sufficient in renewable energy. So actually we just announced that by the end of the year we will be renewably producing more energy than we use in our operations. So we own and operate 534 wind turbines. We've got about 920,000 solar panels on our buildings, all powering our operations. So by next year we'll be a net exporter of green energy, which I think is fantastic.
There's some staggering figures there, but of course you can't do it by yourself, can you? And I think one of the things that has always been on the agenda, and it's perhaps come more so now with the sort of the climate change, you know, sort of all the G7 and stuff like that, is how much intervention is required from governments and I suppose the EU as opposed to the actual sort of member states themselves. I mean, I know that you're obviously you live and work out in Sweden a lot. What is the sort of the tone and the attitude in Sweden as opposed to the UK?
Well, I would say, I live and work in Sweden now, as you say, but I'm originally British. And I think that one of the big contrasts for me is that in Sweden, it's just very much part of the DNA. The expectation is amongst people in their everyday life that they would choose the sustainable option. My daughter's 5. At school, she's already learning about how to cooperate. She's learning about green energy. She's learning about nature. She's being outdoors. It's very much part of their everyday experience, rather than here it's sort of technical and sciencey. I would say in terms of the role of government and the role of business, what we're seeing worldwide is that levels of worry and concern and interest in environmental issues, particularly climate change, amongst consumers and citizens are just going up and up and up. This is not an issue that is kind of fringe, and it's not an issue that's going away. And what we're seeing at the same time is that there's this big gap between people's concern and then their action. People don't know what to do, and their trust in governments and in business is going down. So there's this big opportunity, therefore, because there's this big demand, and then there's people saying, well, what can I need help. And I also want to see that government and that businesses are taking steps and doing things to support me as an individual, and also doing things that's kind of within their own sphere of influence. So I don't think that, personally, I don't think any government agency or any business should be in doubt that the demand is there.
What sort of role, a lot of people talk about social media now, and of course social media is here to stay. I mean, wherever you go, people are on their phones, or they're always signing up to new apps. What sort of place does social media have now in terms of changing that perception?
I think it's very interesting to see how quickly social media has been used to inform and also to bring people together. I think that now people have so much more access to information about issues that in the past were the realms of professionals or scientists. So we're much more informed. For example, the story of our stuff, the things that we use on an everyday basis, all of a sudden we can understand much more where they came from and what happens to them next. So the idea of being a consumer activist or a citizen activist is we're more informed, more transparent, and we can get together with other people. So things like the climate strike movement, things like Extinction Rebellion, I think can happen much more quickly, and people feeling part of a tribe. And that's another thing we see. People want to feel they can do something, they want to see other people doing it, and they also want to be part of a movement. And I think that's the part that social media is playing.
One of the things you mentioned in your keynote speech was about the whole sort of circular economy and about IKEA moving to being effectively a linear supply chain business to something which is circular. So how does that sort of pan out over the next few years?
Well, I think if we look at the trajectory between now and 2030 and all the changes that we want to make as a business, yes, this move from being a linear to a circular business is probably one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest, if not the biggest, opportunity we see. Because we see that if we are, like most manufacturers or retailers, operating in a take, make, dispose way, however efficient and clean we make that chain, it is by definition not going to be sustainable. It's not going to allow us to continue growing. So we're an ambitious company. We want to continue to grow in the same way we have in the last 75 years. We need to start doing that in different ways. So we need to start having different types of transaction. So what it means is that we need to look at everything from our manufacturing to our materials, to our design, but also the services that we offer our customers. So it means that by 2030, all our products need to be designed to circular principles. So not only do they need to be 100% renewable or recycled in terms of materials, they need to be designed in ways that can be repaired, repurposed, resold, and ultimately recycled. And we also need to start helping our customers to acquire things in different ways. So maybe they might be renting, or they might be sharing, they might be leasing rather than buying. We need to help them with repairing, with upgradability, with changing the form and function of the things that they use in their everyday lives. And then we need to help them with end of life. So for example, by the end of next year, in all our 30 markets, we will be testing the idea of furniture as a service. So it's like a leasing model, so that, you know, maybe you don't want to own a sofa, maybe you just want the ability to sit down for the next 5 years in lots of different ways. You could lease that from IKEA.
Now, I mean, the PPMA Total Show is the biggest processing packaging show in the UK, an annual event. I mean, you've done the walk around here, sort of 450 exhibitors, a mix between, you know, smaller SME type companies to, you know, the largest multinationals. They've all got challenges. They've all got challenges in terms of the packaging particularly. What sort of advice, given the fact that sort of IKEA is very much sort of leading the way in terms of initiatives, what sort of advice could you give, particularly some of the smaller companies that are maybe just sort of setting out and looking to make their mark within the industry?
Well, I think that one of the big things to acknowledge on this agenda is whatever your size, even if you're as big as IKEA, you're not going to be able to do this on your own. The scale of the challenges and the time scale with which we need to address them is so big and so fast that we can't kind of continue to do it in our box. We need to start becoming a lot more transparent. We need to think about collaboration. We need to think about co-creation and working together. So I think that's one thing, is kind of reach out rather than this co-create rather than compete. I think it's also about really using people's, if you like, the outcome and people's everyday life at home and their needs as your starting point. Take the brief from them rather than trying to kind of come up with a technical one-size-fits-all solution. Okay. I think it's about working with your customers to understand that, and also understanding what you and the customer can't do. So what other things you might need to help, for example, in terms of infrastructure and the context that you're operating in, and that might be it might be a collaboration between other manufacturers or suppliers, it might be collaborations with local councils, it might be policy changes and so on. It's really to start to understand what's the outcome, what's your role, how can you collaborate, how can we all move faster than if we're trying to do this on our own.
Joanna, I've got to ask you this question. About sort of 10, 12 years ago, you co-presented a show called Outrageous Wasters, and I know, you know, that was very much about trying to sort of make a more eco-friendly home and much more sustainable living. Since that time, what do you think has actually sort of changed in the home environment particularly?
Yeah, so Outrageous Wasters, that's a series I did, you're right, with BBC Three. I think it was 2008. And what we did then is we set out to find Britain's most wasteful families and kind of show them the error of their ways and come up with new ways of doing things. I think a lot has changed since then, but perhaps not as much as we might have hoped. I think that back then the families that we were working with were not only wasteful, they didn't think there was a problem when they started. Obviously, by the end they did, I'm proud to say they changed, and the ones I'm still in touch with are still living a much more sustainable way. But they really A, didn't care, or B, didn't think that anything they could do could make a difference. And I'd like to think that generally speaking, we see a big shift. We see that in Britain. We also see that in countries worldwide where, this rise of awareness and concern about environmental issues, and people recognizing that this isn't something that we need to worry about for our children or even our grandchildren. It's here and now. And it's not something I believe in, it's something that's happening. So that is a shift. I think we still see, unfortunately, this gap between kind of concern and action, and I still think that people feel, they probably feel even more frustrated than they did then, because we have higher levels of awareness and education, and you can see this stuff happening around you. You can see the strange weather, you can see the accumulation of plastic in waterways and so on. It's much more immediate, but people still feel frustrated that they're not necessarily quite sure what to do, or feel that they've got the tools at their fingertips. So I would say that kind of, we don't need to do so much anymore on raising awareness. What we need to do now is focus more on solutions, on empowering people to make the difference that they really want to make, to bringing them together and show, just demonstrating that when we can all do this together, we can do it quite fast.
And if someone wants to find out more information, where should they go? Where can they easily find out what they need?
Well, I think there's lots of different sources. I mean, I think still, organisations like RAP in the UK, I've worked with them on and off over the years, and I think they're fantastic in terms of consumers understanding these things. There's a charity called Hubbub in the UK that we've been working with on a project called Live Lagom for IKEA, which is about helping people to make everyday changes in their lifestyle. Those would be two ports of call. I would also say contact your local council, because I know that different councils do different things, but this is part of their remit, and they will be able to help you to understand in your local area what you can do and where you can take action.
Joanna, it's an absolute privilege to have you on PPMA TV today. Really appreciate your time, and obviously wish you a safe journey back to Sweden.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.